then we drop a D-bomb. Hey! We say pay, 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 yo. Kick your ass, then we gonna come home. George Bush say that revenge come. Payback come and we drop the bomb. Load them bombs till the morning come. Airplane come and we drop the bomb. Come, Mr. Taliban, turn over Bin Laden. Colin Powell gonna bomb his home. Come, Mr. Taliban, turn over Bin Laden. Payback come and we drop the bomb. Lift one bomb, two bomb, hit the floor. Payback come and we drop the bomb. 6 bomb, 7 bomb, 8 bomb more. Cruise missile knocking at your door. Come, Mr. Taliban, turn over Bin Laden. Colin Powell gonna bomb his home. Come, Mr. Taliban, turn over Bin Laden. Payback come and we drop the bomb. Lift 1 bomb, 2 bomb, hit the floor. Payback come and we drop the bomb. 6 bomb, 7 bomb, 8 bomb more. Cruise missile knocking at your door. Hey-oh, we said hey-oh. Kick your ass, then we won, come home.
All right, hope you all enjoyed that. That's a song that was put out shortly after 9/11. I think within 7 days after 9/11, capturing the sentiment of the times that we just need to kill Osama bin Laden to solve the problem. This is not a commentary on what's going on in Israel, but I thought it was funny. It made me think of it. So hope you enjoyed that. This is the Pamphleteer's Office Hours. I'm your host, Davis Hunt, editor-in-chief of the Pamphleteer. I do this weekly. Start out the show. If you're not familiar with the Pamphleteer, we are a daily newsletter that talks about Nashville politics, arts, and culture. We send out newsletters every single morning around lunch, kind of like the Nashville Banner used to do in the afternoon. The Tennessean was in the morning. And we're modeled after the Alt Weekly model in Nashville. The Alt Weekly is the Nashville scene. In Los Angeles, it's the LA Weekly. In New York, it's the Village Voice. So we kind of inherit from that spirit, distinct from your more traditional news outlets like the Tennessean or the newer variants, such as the Tennessee Lookout, the Nashville Banner that's been since resurrected. So that's what we do. I start out this show by looking back at some of the coverage we've done this week. We've got 2 other shows this week. I do this every Wednesday night. Megan Podsiedlik has a show tomorrow afternoon covering specifically stuff around the Nashville city politics and, when relevant, the General Assembly at the state level. And on Friday, Jared focuses on mostly on movies. That's where his expertise lies, but a variety of cultural topics. He'll also have on authors and that kind of thing. This is kind of the vibe of the Pamphleteer. If I could describe the show, it would be, this sets the tone for kind of how we do things at the Pamphleteer. So if you enjoy this, you'll probably enjoy the newsletter. So let's look at this past week in coverage at the Pamphleteer. Or, it's not exactly coverage. It's things that either we covered or I saw that were interesting in the news, such as this first one, which is the Whiskey Trail in Tennessee is a massive driver of tourism dollars. There's 40 distilleries on the trail. As you can see, most of them cluster around Nashville and Sevierville or Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area. It has a $3.45 billion impact last year and brings in about 30,000 jobs and created tax revenues around $450 million. I thought that was interesting. It's a lot of money. It's kind of an under-discussed aspect of the tourism industry in Nashville. I think a lot of focus goes to visitors to Smoky Mountain National Park and Nashville, downtown Nashville, obviously just to drink or go to concerts. You probably drink when you're, well, I've been to Gatlinburg and I do know that if you're not in the park, you're most likely drinking. Weirdly enough, those are the two counties. Davidson, Sevier County, and Williamson County are the three counties in Tennessee that take in more tax than they are granted from the state. There was another article from the Tennessee Lookout using that as, I think the presumption was that because these states bring in more tax revenue, they should have some sort of special privilege. I don't know. I don't want to get into that. Another piece of information from Forbes. Forbes did a study that showed that Nashville is the worst commuting city in the country. And they have this kind of formula they use. They have a walk score, a transit score, and a biking score, which if you live in Nashville, you know that all these things are basically irrelevant to your life. You're going to drive your car everywhere. That's just a fact. That's the cold hard truth about most people's lives in Nashville. And a lot of people make the trade-off to trade walkability, bikeability, whatever, for houses with yards and space. And it's not really a viewpoint you see reflected. This article is interesting because layered throughout it, I think it's like a sponsored content that Forbes did in partnership with some moving companies, because as it's talking about commuting, at the bottom of the article, there's this whole section about here are moving companies you can call in each of these cities if you want to leave. And if you notice, Tennessee, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, of course, DC, I guess that's because I'm not really familiar with the geography of DC, but I guess it's because people are driving from Virginia to get there. New York being a bad commuter town, again, that doesn't make sense to me. Boston, I don't know. Anyway, it's a weird article. I thought it was interesting though that Nashville's the worst. I'm surprised Memphis isn't on here, but I don't think Memphis has as many workers as Nashville does. So if you're commuting into Nashville, just know that you have it worse. You have it worse than anyone else in the country. So be thankful, at least. Another little thought bubble. I was watching playoff baseball this week, like I hope a lot of you were. Baseball is the rule changes they've made to the game have made it more entertaining. I grew up playing baseball. I played baseball for most of my young life. And the funny thing is my dad used to ask me and my brother what we wanted to do when we grew up. And the great dilemma that we would, kind of haggle over in our young heads was whether we wanted to be professional football players or professional baseball players. So anyway, I love baseball, and the rule changes have sped up the game and made it more tolerable to watch. And one of the more interesting things that occurred to me watching it the other night was how the entire arrangement of the game has culminated in pitchers basically maxing out their arms at 100 miles an hour, which is just such a perfect even number. We haven't seen pitchers max out their arms at 80 miles an hour or 75 miles an hour or some other kind of seemingly arbitrary number. They've basically we've arrived at 100 miles an hour as the, it's not the highest because guys like Aroldis Chapman consistently throw anywhere from 104 to 106, but we've arrived at that as kind of the perfect fastball. And for a while it was, I think until, I don't know, in the past couple of years, I was trying to look up information on this, on the number of pitchers throwing 100 miles an hour. And it's not that the number of pitchers that throw 100 miles an hour fastballs has increased. It's that pitchers are throwing them with more frequency, which I think is due to a couple of things, which is the seams have been lowered. And I think pitchers are, if you're on Instagram and you go on baseball Instagram, which believe me, I do, you'll see a lot of pitching coaches teaching mechanics that are designed to max out your velocity. And so they push kids to max velocity at the expense of everything else in training. And when I was training as a pitcher, there was no emphasis on velocity. It was all about control, mechanics, etc. You were like, velocity was assumed to be this thing that was kind of intangible that you could not increase. There was a hard limit on it. There was little you could do if you couldn't throw the ball 90 miles an hour. And now from it seems like pitchers have started to, contort their bodies in such and such ways to max out velocity. Tim Lincecum is kind of the first pitcher that demonstrated this. He was just kind of a skinny, wiry, short guy about my size. Actually, I'm probably heavier than him, to be honest with you. But he would throw the ball 97 miles an hour. And I remember this article in ESPN the magazine all about his windup and how him and his dad had kind of developed it in the backyard as a way for him to get every single extra mile on his fastball. And he flamed out pretty quickly, won a Cy Young, was very effective, but his arm, a guy that's kind of cheating with not cheating, but hacking their body movements to max out velocity seems to have a shorter career. That's just a random thought bubble, but it is kind of interesting, though. You have to admit, after all these years, baseball pitchers have arrived we've started seeing 100 miles an hour. It's just a perfect number. Anyway, maybe I don't know if that makes any sense. Whatever. So the floating city. So I wrote a column earlier this week about I was out around the town last Friday night at Mother's Ruin, if you're familiar with that bar, and I was in the upstairs portion of it. I saw an old friend that I hadn't seen in a while, started talking to him. He was sitting with a big group of people. Turns out that they were all Oracle employees who had just moved to town in anticipation of the River North campus, which, if you can remember far enough back, was kind of the first big development deal that Mayor Cooper did. And when this deal was made, it was in the middle of the city passing bills that prevented high school athletes from competing on teams in sports that aren't related to their birth at gender. And he threw out this quote, "I don't want to let us become viewed as a backwater nationally," Cooper said at the time. It turns out that the politics of the state had very little effect on the decision of Oracle to move here, because the city had laid out some incentive packages for them to move. Turned out to be irrelevant. Nothing happened, despite kind of the fear mongering from Cooper. I was just, it brings up the question: what do citizens gain from these development deals? When I saw I'm sure all these people were perfectly nice. But it's funny that when you're sold these things in the public, you're told, "Oh, we're going to have more higher paying jobs," which I guess are supposed to be for people that live in the city. Or is it just for people that are moving here that get those higher paying jobs and displace the people that are already here? It's unclear. In this scenario, this little anecdote, all of them had just moved to town and, presumably occupied these higher paying jobs. It's an interesting question to ask when presented with these investment development deals, what they actually benefit, how they actually benefit you as a citizen versus what they do for either expanding the tax base or, just helping someone like John Cooper put another feather in his cap and having something he can put in his legacy. I don't know if y'all saw, but he sent out this flyer at a week after he left office that outlined all of his highlights. It was like a 3-page document. These people are very concerned with their legacy and how they'll be remembered. And, a development deal as benign as Oracle building a campus on the East Bank is certainly up there for some reason. It's not really clear to me what I gain from it personally or what you would gain from it, but we're supposed to understand it as a positive nonetheless. I'll just read the final 2 paragraphs of the thing. As fervently as the debate around these deals inflames public discourse, as soon as the deal is done and the checks are stroked, the promise and benefits of more jobs and tax revenue disappear like a mirage. We forget about them. If they fail, we mostly remain none the wiser. But when you're inebriated at midnight, they come back to you faintly as if in a dream. Oracle, Amazon, Ford, batteries, jobs, diversity, tax revenue, giant apartment buildings, bigger dog parks, better restaurants, more activities, more people, more. A better Nashville for all. So growth at what expense? That's what I'm asking. It's an open-ended question. I'm not really sure. Next up. This morning, Jared Hollyfield authored a great article on Gary Humble, founder of Tennessee Stands, and an advocacy group that kind of emerged and gained traction during COVID in combating masking policies and forced vaccination in the state. They authored a bunch of legislation, or they applied pressure to the Lee administration, and they're being soft on the COVID omnibus bill, among a bunch of other things. And Humble has been very effective in building a coalition of support in Williamson County. Jared is talking to Gary on his show on Friday. So if you want to learn more specifically about that, you should tune into Jared's show on Friday afternoon. I just wanted to pinpoint this as something that you should go check out on the website as a preamble to what we're going to be talking about today with Porter, which is the Franklin mayor's race. And there is some synergy between Gary Humble and his efforts to reimagine populism in a post-Trump world that Gabrielle Hansen, the controversial mayoral candidate, has tapped into. And I'm going to bring Porter up to talk about it. I'm titling this Porter's viewpoint on this as folk political analysis, because typically when you look at political analysis, it's from people that do this for a living. Porter's just a guy that knows Williamson County very well. And so I'm going to let him sell you on his credentials, because let's bring him up. Porter, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I heard you talking about baseball earlier. Same old Braves.
Yeah, I know, man. You made that joke that the playoffs don't start until the Braves get out of the first round, which it's
Every Braves fan knows you wait until after the first round, then you watch.
Yeah, that's so true. As long as I've been alive, that's been the case. They very rarely make it to the NLCS, but they always are in the NLDS. So, yeah, you captured that well. Well, Porter, okay, so you've presented to me a compelling thesis for why Gabrielle Hansen has a chance at winning this election, despite her being, in my opinion, the worst candidate of all time. I mean, I say that as kind of an exaggeration, but it amazes me that she has a chance. And so, first, what gives you insight into why this may be the case?
Well, you make a very good point there. The worst possible candidate. We had a very similar thing happen in 2016 in this country with an extremely strange and once in a million, no way candidate win against an established candidate who was hated by just as many people as the other side had. I mean, so let's back up on this. So Franklin for a long time, Franklin has been sort of a small semi-rural town that's experienced a lot of explosive growth. And with a lot of small towns in the South, there is an established group of families, of groups of people, Rotary clubs and whatnot, who have sort of been in charge of everything for a long time. And this is not neither a bad or a good thing. It's a fact of life. And Ken Moore has been the mayor now for quite a while, since about, I think, 2011 or so. And he's been sort of a quiet, sleepy mayor of a quiet, sleepy town. That is until the controversial vote that he cast to approve the Franklin Pride Parade and festival over at Harlinsdale Farm. This has been a very controversial issue in Franklin since it started, and his vote really stirred up this conservative behemoth that has existed in Williamson County and Franklin. Franklin is a place that you sort of move to get away from the madness of whatever blue state or whatever blue city that you come from. And a lot of people who in the last 15 years have moved to Franklin have been willing to stay out of anything city related because they haven't felt like they needed to. It's just boring, normal mayor things. Well, that's over now. Now you have an awakened conservative base that is larger than the established group in Franklin, which is a mixture of old Southern families, a little bit of old Southern money. You've got some, I don't know what the right word is, your NPR, liberal crowd. You've got a mixture of downtown people that have traditionally only voted in anything related to the mayor's race. In the article, we have the list. There's been about 3,000 votes for mayor the last 4 or 5 elections, and we're now coming up on 9,000.
Yeah, that's insane.
So, and that's still a very low turnout. I mean, this could get into the 5 digits because traditionally, if you pull up Franklin on a map, you have the old part of Franklin, which exists in downtown and inside the Mac Hatcher bypass loop. That is really the old part of Franklin. Your newer parts of Franklin are expanding to the east down Highway 96, both the north of Highway 96, which is Cool Springs, and the south part of Highway 96, which is Royal Oaks, Forest Crossing, all the way down to 840, even a lot of neighborhoods. And these are people who, by a large majority, did not grow up in the area. They're from other places. They're generally conservative voters. And now they are actively engaged. You used to only see for mayor signs after you crossed Machatcher going into downtown right around the Pinkerton Park area, because that's about when that's usually where all the voters are. Well, that's not the case now. You have got numbers coming in from south. You've got numbers coming in from east, which is McKay's Mill up and down through Carruthers Road. And you've got a large turnout farther west towards West Haven and West 96. So we've already blown past we know Ken Moore has 3,000 people who will vote for him, but we've now blown past that. And really this is the moment that I've kind of wondered myself, having grown up in Williamson County, I've kind of wondered why these conservative people don't get involved. Well, they are now. And it's very, very, let's see, what's the word? It's popping in Franklin right now. This is the most controversial thing that has ever happened in Franklin since if you read your history books, the Franklin versus Brentwood fight over the Cool Springs Mall. Like this is the hottest thing that has ever hit Franklin. Everybody knows each other about it.
The thing that motivated it too, from what I understand, is Ken Moore casting the tie-breaking vote and approving Pride at the Harlansdale farm. So I think a lot of Gabrielle Hansen has pounced on that and used that as her kind of springboard.
Well, she, a lot of the downtown people have over the years slowly begun to try to not erase, because you really can't erase what happened in Franklin in the Civil War, but push it aside, throw it in the basement, get rid of it. And they've really, Dr. Moore has been he's always really relied on flying under the radar, not making waves. And, when it's time to get reelected, there's been no controversies. There's been nothing to yell about. So people just, oh, well, I'm not going to vote for mayor. Because like I said, Franklin, even still today, Franklin is a very normal place. And most people aren't concerned with, budgeting for manholes and various idiosyncrasies of managing a city. It usually takes a really, really dynamic culture war issue to drive this kind of action that's going on in Franklin right now.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And Gabrielle, she, the national media has sort of made her into this MAGA clown type person. But number one, she is a very effective communicator. You don't become absolutely real estate agent. And this goes for just about everybody I've ever seen in Franklin these days. These people, they appear ditzy and dumb, but they're very, very proficient at communicating, at selling. And she has really, she has tapped into a large demographic in Franklin that is just like her. Franklin is a majority female city. A lot of people don't realize it's a majority female city, affluent females, and she relates to them way more than Ken Moore does.
100%. Okay, so I was talking to you about this earlier, but I was at an event last night, and I was talking to this girl who had just moved with her husband to Franklin, and just with this going on, and me and you talking about it, I just drilled into her about who was she voting for mayor, where did she live, etc. And, it's very interesting because she doesn't fit the typical profile of the type of person you would think that would vote for someone like Gabrielle Hansen. She was a like a girl that would look not out of place in Beverly Hills or something of that nature. But her main concern was that her, she coming from LA, her and her husband wanting to have kids and thinking about that. They'd seen the lunacy that has developed in California, and they're obviously concerned about that. And when you see someone like Ken Moore blanch on something that has got so much public opposition, it really just makes them, I think it made her and maybe these other people realize that they're not as safe as they once thought they were. And, it was an interesting conversation. And, I don't know.
I'll be honest with you. I share that sentiment with them because growing up in Williamson County, I'll be 40 years old next year. It really, all of the things that were happening on TV were thousands of miles away. It might as well have been on the moon.
Yeah.
And your life in a lot of people don't like it, but it has a lot of endearing qualities to be away from everything controversial that's going on in the world. And it's a very shocking thing when that thing comes to your doorstep. And I'll be honest with you, I share the same sentiment. It's strange to me. I mean, all these people from the world of politics and entertainment, the grifter types, they're walking down the street now. And there's Black Lives Matter protests on the streets of Franklin. There's things that used to only happen on TV, and now they're in the small town of Franklin. Only in Franklin's case, there is a conservative supermajority that was previously sort of not engaged. Now they are. And I would only, I really do think Gabrielle Henson has a strong chance of winning. Broken it down a little bit, she has to grab at least 40% of these traditional areas, downtown, west, and the old parts of Franklin that vote. If she can grab about 40% of those and turn out her people, which is South Franklin, East Franklin, and West Haven, she can take this home, and we'll have ourselves a new mayor who's a very outspoken person, but also, through no fault of her own, now a national media figure for some reason.
Do you think the voting blocks for Moore and Hanson are as simple as natives versus refugees /
That's a good question, and yes, I think so. Although, yes, usually in Tennessee, the natives versus outsiders can be more of a conservative versus liberal thing.
Yeah,
but in this case, it's the other way around because downtown Franklin, it's almost like it was a little Athens in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You have a very strong, what's the right word? Just a community, like an art community, and people who are more progressive than the rest of the county. It's always been that. And they've really stayed the same in number, whereas the surrounding Franklin has boomed into this, whether you like it or not, this suburban place filled with people who you would expect in the suburbs, conservative Republican voters these days.
Right.
And so it is, a lot of the Moore supporters are your longtime people, particularly in and around the downtown corridor area.
Yeah.
And Gabrielle Henson, it's all Californians and a lot of Midwesterners who have moved down here to get away from that.
Yeah, and she's had Phil Williams on her case, trying to pin her with charges of white supremacy, and you had an interesting perspective on her promoting prostitution charge.
So the original,
elaborate on that, yeah.
So her original controversy was her comments, her insensitive comments about the Covenant shooting.
That's okay. But before, I just want to get, so the reason that I think, look, I'm not going to hide the fact that I have personal animosity towards her because of that. Because Covenant, I have strong ties to Covenant. It's where I grew up going to church. My dad's an elder there. And when she came out and did that, that's when she got on my radar. And ever since then, it's been hard for me to shake that image of her. But talking to you now and talking to people about why they're voting for her, I still don't think she's competent, but
that was the original controversy, but that went away very quickly. There were people in the city office who wanted her censured. There were aldermen who wanted her censured. The aldermen voted not to because there was no breaking of any codes or ethics violation. There was nothing to censure her about other than she said something dumb.
Right.
So that really went away quick. And then of course after that, the inflammatory articles just got worse and worse and worse. And the prostitution one that Phil Williams put out really stoked the fire with this female base that she has in Franklin. The Tennessean did a great breakdown of it where they told her side of the story. And essentially she, as a young professional in Dallas, she worked for modeling agencies and was sort of roped into unknowingly some sort of, whether you would call it some sort of escort operation in Dallas. And she was one of the people who had to take the fall for it. And a lot of people, a lot of newer residents in Franklin who come from LA, who come from California, who come from the industries out there that are very similar with things that go on like that, they saw that article and were definitely enraged. And it really, really, really drove home the idea that there's this group out to get her and stop her.
Yeah.
And it really galvanized her people. I'm telling you, I would hear the past 2 or 3 weeks that I'm in Franklin, I'm hearing like from a lot of female residents of the area, that particular issue really angered and pissed off a lot of people.
Mm. That's interesting because I guess they relate to her being taken advantage of. And they essentially
called her a prostitute. The Phil Williams she was busted for prostitution. That's not at all.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not like when I see pictures of her now, I like that association is seared into my brain as well. It's just weird how media works in that way, where he throws out that thing. The way that he positioned the headline was very, incriminatory without actually investigating it any further. She actually came out with a statement before he came out with the story, I think. Like she did that Instagram video about it, admitting to it. Because I got tipped off about that weeks before that, and I didn't want to do anything with it just because it was kind of outside of our thing. I didn't, I felt kind of just uncomfortable doing it simply because I already had beef with this woman.
Well, the articles, just by looking at what I'm looking at with the data totals, it seems to have had very little effect at turning out a knee-jerk voter against Hansen, which would be a lot more. I mean, you've got downtown at 1,903 votes. You've got West Franklin, which includes West Haven, at 1,530. So that's around 3,000 some odd votes. That's about the total that you would normally get for a Franklin mayor election. But now, something that has not happened ever, you've got this massive 2,100 vote count from South Franklin. Just the largest block of the entire city is South Franklin, which is south of 96. All the suburban neighborhoods down there, all the way down to 840. The lines get very tricky, but essentially it trickles through Forest Crossing all the way down to Ramsey headquarters and the neighborhoods there. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then you've got Cool Springs coming in with 1,100 votes, and Cool Springs is a strange place. It's a place where a lot of transient apartment dwellers, H-1B corporate workers. It's a place that a lot of people, transient people usually do not put down roots and usually do not vote in a boring mayor election. If you got any knee-jerk voters, you probably would have it there. Those are people who would probably, for instance, watch the John Oliver piece and then go and vote accordingly.
She was on John Oliver. I didn't see that.
Yeah, he took her to task, which is strange. It's strange to me. It's strange to me that Franklin has become this spotlight amongst the nation, because I'm going to tell you, man, it used to be like you would never find anything on the internet about Franklin. Not even on YouTube, nothing. You would find nothing about Franklin. And now, there's this big giant spotlight. The culture war has come to Franklin. And,
I think it's, as like Nashville, Middle Tennessee was like right at the boundary line between the North and the South during the Civil War. And I think it's kind of always been this place where a lot of these conflicts have focused. Like right now we've got Nashville, which is just getting this deep shade of blue, and Williamson County seems to be turning redder, and they're right next to one another. And if you grow up in Nashville, like the county you interface the most with is Brentwood, Williamson County. Like I knew a ton of people growing up from Brentwood that went to Ravenwood, Brentwood High School, Brentwood Academy, all those schools out there, Independence when they came around. So it's an interesting, like, you've got this very progressive Nashville, more progressive than it's ever been. They've got 22 women on the council now, which is interesting too, because you're talking about Franklin being driven by the political preferences of women as well. I find the two sitting next to one another just endlessly fascinating, though, and especially this in particular because, I don't know, Franklin didn't go. It went for Trump, but it wasn't by a significant margin.
Well, Williamson County overall definitely did, although there is a large never-Trumper. This is the county that voted for Marco Rubio in primaries. So,
really,
yes. So it's that those kinds of people. So just picture those kinds of people.
I mean, and like people forget too. You've got like David French who lives there, and some people from the Federalist live there, and a lot of like influential conservative media people, either of the extreme variety or the more like never Trump variety, like French, do live in the area as well.
Yes, I mean, it's sad, you know. They've all, but at least they've all congregated in one county. The folks in Rutherford and Murray and various others, they're spared.
Yeah. So basically, your thesis for this is that Hansen has engaged this voter base that typically does not turn out for elections, and that's mostly newer residents that live in South Franklin, being her strongest base of support.
Definitely, yeah. And you know, the thing that I'm interested to see is in a scenario where she does win, where do we go from here? Because there is, you know, in an old school slobber knocker Southern style election, these wounds that get opened don't heal.
Yeah.
There are feuds in the South. We have feuds, blood feuds, and a lot of times these last for decades. There is a lot of that going on in Franklin right now over this particular election. And so I'm interested to see. I can't imagine that we'll just go back to normal.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a new world we're in here in Franklin, and really, it's Franklin changing into a city. You know, it's changing into a city that's, you know, large, a large affluent population, and with that comes everything that goes with it. You know.
Yeah. You're right, though. This election is kind of this like landmark moment for that area. That I just hate that that national media has turned its gaze on it. It's the same thing with Nashville, and I think this last election with Freddie winning, I think it was less revolutionary than people are making it out to be. And I think the next election in 4 more years will be more consequential. Because hopefully a more capable candidate will emerge, and or you know, someone that can go to bat against Freddie will emerge. And I wonder if the same thing's true in Franklin. I don't know, but you're right. I mean, it's opened up a wound that is definitely not going to heal. I mean, it's crazy to me what's happening down there. The fact that a candidate who is openly anti-LGBTQ in that area, being anti-gay, being close to like winning is fascinating. I mean, if I live there and have kids, I'd vote for her, no joke. But I still think she's a bad candidate.
Well, we'll see. Maybe she'll be a better mayor, or maybe we will get the Trump show in Franklin.
Yeah. I guess we'll find out. Porter, thanks for chatting with me about this. Well, also in tomorrow's newsletter, Porter has an article that's kind of breaking all this down. He's going to go through break down some numbers, give his kind of breakdown of the different areas and why he thinks Gabrielle has a chance. I think generally the consensus is that people are watching this and just kind of wryly amused by it, not, thinking that there is no chance in hell Gabrielle Hansen can win the race. Porter is, as you just heard, is contending that she does have a chance. So if you want to read more about that tomorrow, it'll be in tomorrow morning's newsletter. So thanks a lot, Porter. Talk to you soon. All right, well, that's our show for the evening. Thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, if you have not signed up for our daily newsletter, you can sign up at our website, pamphleteer.co, and you can get Porter's analysis of the mayor's race there. So tune in for that. We'll see y'all next week.